Augustus' attempt to reshape Roman morality through law marks one of the most fascinating intersections of politics, social engineering, and personal ethics in the ancient world. The Julian laws on adultery, formerly known as the Lex Julia de Adulteriis Coercendis, 18 BCE, were not merely punitive measures against sexual misconduct, they represented an ambitious attempt by the first Roman emperor to legislate morality, enforce family values, and stabilize the social fabric of Rome after years of civil wars and political upheaval. Before Augustus, Rome had little state involvement in private sexual behavior. While adultery was socially condemned and could spark personal vengeance, it was primarily a private matter handled within families. Roman fathers, for example, had legal authority over their daughters' conduct and could punish misconduct as part of patria potestas, the legal power of the father. Yet, public law did not intervene in marital fidelity or sexual behavior. Augustus' reforms were revolutionary in that they shifted the lens from private control to state enforcement, reflecting both his desire to cultivate a morally upright citizenry and to reinforce the institution of marriage as a cornerstone of Rome's political stability. The law itself was precise and multifaceted. Under the Lex Julia de Adulteriis, adultery was criminalized as a public offense. Adultery was defined as a married woman having sexual relations with a man not her husband, though men were also subject to legal consequences in certain cases. Punishments were harsh. The adulterous woman could be exiled to a remote town or confiscated from her husband, while the male partner could face fines, exile, and social exclusion. A striking aspect of the law was its recognition of male complicity in adultery as legally punishable, although societal double standards still persisted, often allowing men greater leeway in extramarital relationships than women. In addition to punishing adultery, the Julian laws introduced incentives to encourage lawful marriage and procreation, particularly among the elite. The Lex Julia et Papia Papia, a later expansion of the original laws, imposed penalties on celibacy and rewarded families with 3 or more children. Augustus' broader goal was a population policy, to replenish Rome's citizen body, which had suffered from civil wars and declining birth rates, and to encourage the continuity of aristocratic lineages. In this sense, the legislation was as much about politics and demographics as it was about morality, linking personal virtue to public duty. Enforcing the law required mechanisms that blended public and private oversight. Husbands were encouraged to bring charges against adulterous wives, but there were also public officials and courts involved. Interestingly, the law also allowed fathers and husbands to act with relative impunity if they caught adulterers in the act, reflecting both a continuation of patriarchal authority and the state's endorsement of familial vigilance. In practice, however, enforcement was uneven, often dependent on social standing and political connections. Elite men, for example, could sometimes negotiate their way out of penalties, while women of lower status faced harsher consequences. Thus, the law, while morally ambitious, was entangled in Rome's complex social hierarchies. The cultural and political impact of these laws was profound. Augustus presented himself as a moral reformer, the restorer of Rome's lost virtues, and the protector of the family unit. Public morality became a state concern, and private behavior was increasingly scrutinized through the lens of civic responsibility. Poets like Ovid, however, highlighted the tension between personal desire and legal restriction, famously criticizing Augustus' reforms in works like Ars Amatoria and ultimately suffering exile. The Julian laws illustrate a society wrestling with the limits of legal control over human behavior, revealing the challenges of imposing morality through coercion. Modern scholars often debate the effectiveness and motivations behind the Julian laws. Some argue that Augustus genuinely sought to restore traditional Roman values after decades of corruption and civil conflict, using legislation as a tool of social engineering. Others suggest that the laws served more pragmatic political purposes, consolidating power, legitimizing the imperial family, and controlling elite behavior under the guise of morality. The intertwining of law, politics, and social ethics in these reforms demonstrates how legal systems can become instruments for shaping societal norms, a theme that resonates even in contemporary discussions about morality, governance, and personal freedom. In conclusion, the Julian laws on adultery were more than just regulations on sexual behavior, they were a carefully orchestrated effort by Augustus to align private life with public virtue, secure family structures, and reinforce the stability of the Roman state. By criminalizing adultery, incentivizing marriage and procreation, and intertwining morality with political authority, Augustus transformed personal ethics into a matter of public policy. The laws reveal the tensions between human desires, social expectations, and the reach of legal authority, an enduring lesson in how societies attempt to legislate morality and the complexities that arise when personal lives become subject to the law.